We were more like brothers looking out for each other, hung together through thick and thin. You gotta have a
What's shaking, podcast world? Back at you, another episode of Eukanuba, the Duck Dog series on the Foul Life podcast. So excited to have y'all back with us. Hope y'all are enjoying the content. Just had a great episode with 1999 World Goose Calling Champion, 2000 Champion of Champions, World Goose Calling Champion, Kelly Powers. He's always a blast to have on the show. Hopefully y'all were enjoying those stories about the late, great Tim Grounds. We did that podcast on the 2-year anniversary of Tim's passing. It's amazing that it's already been 2 years. We miss him. But I hope y'all got to listen to Kelly Powers lay it down, some of those great stories of being in the field, being on the stage, being on the road with Tim Grounds. We miss you, Tim. Rest in peace, my man. Today's episode of the podcast is brought to you by our friends at the best dog food in the world, the best pet food in the world, Eukanuba. We truly believe in it. We see a completely different animal in our dogs when we feed Eukanuba on a consistent basis. If I were you, I would really do some research and due diligence on nutrition and what dogs need in their cycle, their GI tract, everything that goes into their digestive system, their energy, their hair, their lips, their gums, their joints, their hips. It's amazing what Eukanuba is doing for our dogs all across the country. Brad Arrington and Lee Howard at Team Mossy Pond down in Georgia feed it exclusively. Andrew up at Wild Acre in Minnesota feeds it exclusively. We're feeding it all over the country and we're getting awesome results. Just check it out. Do the test. Feed your dog, transition into it for a week or two, and just look at the results and the difference it makes in the dog's life. We're looking for a great quality of life, and that's what Eukanuba provides for us. Our guest today, you've heard him here at the Foul Life podcast before during our Dogtra Training Caller series. He's been on with Brad Arrington. We've talked to Mr. Pete Fischer about several different topics. He's been a vet tech. He owned a very successful kennel in central Minnesota. He's a duck hunter, a goose hunter, an upland hunter, a dog owner, a dog lover. Mr. Pete, how are you, my man?
We're doing good today, Chad. Thanks for having me on a second time. I guess this is the sequel, huh?
Yeah, this is when we get a hit maker, you got to keep topping those charts. So you got to bring him back once in a while.
Yeah, you're too kind. Thanks, though.
How's, it's October. It's actually, it was almost right around 40, 42 degrees here for the low out west. Is it getting pretty cold up there now?
It has. The leaves are turning. Leaves are coming off the trees now, Chad. No ice on the ponds. That's always the indicator when we're really getting into fall. But no ice on the ponds yet. But we're seeing a few birds around. Not great numbers. We've actually got a really good pheasant crop this year in Minnesota. Our waterfall have kind of moved west on us, the migration, but we see a few, but not like it used to be. But fall is here. Time to get your dog out, and this is all the things we practice for all summer long, and get them out and start on-the-job training now.
So with it moving west, like you just mentioned, are you moving west with them? Will you leave and go into the Dakotas at all and follow the ducks to get on some of these early season hunts while the migration's thick in those areas?
I have hunted North Dakota over the years. It's some of the finest waterfowl hunting I ever had in my life. Was up around Goodrich with a group of friends, and it was just phenomenal field hunting and some water hunting. I don't anymore. I don't get west anymore. I probably have some contacts if I looked around out there, but no, I don't. I kind of hunt locally, hunt pheasants locally, and you're going to laugh. I hunt deer, which there's more darn deer around now, Chad, than there are anything, and that's the least hunting that I really do. I hunt it because I love venison, and I hunt about 100 yards from my house. And we've got just an incredible deer population this year. But our waterfowl hunting's really gone downhill, and I haven't been out to North Dakota in a couple of years.
So you talk about deer hunting. Are you using dogs for deer hunting at all? Are you shed hunting with them? Are you tracking with them? Are you bloodhounding these dogs at all that you own?
No, up in Minnesota, you cannot use a dog for any kind of a big game hunting, such as deer. So that's not legal. I've never gotten into the shed hunting. I did hunt tests, field trials, gun dog training, and then hunted my dogs. But no, I never did any of the shed dog worked at competitions that are out there now.
When you have that many deer around, do you, at this time of year, do you still have to worry about ticks and Lyme disease and deer ticks that you would see in the late spring and the summer months on a deer population or a deer herd?
Oh my, that is a great question, Chad. And What happens, a lot of people think that once we get into the fall that we don't have ticks anymore. And we actually have a resurgence of the deer tick. And the deer ticks, with deer ticks comes Lyme's disease. And I've got a little story I want to tell real quick. Within the last 2 weeks, I had a friend of mine, I'm just going to call her Karen, even though I told her I wouldn't mention her name. Karen got a hold of me one night. She says, "If you got a minute, I need some advice." And so I said, "Sure." And so she called me. It was probably 8, 9 o'clock at night. And she has a little Australian Shepherd. And she said, "Pete, my dog's laying by the back door. I just got home from work. And this dog looks like he's on death's door, so to speak." And so, I worked as a vet tech, Chad, before I was in the dog training business, before I worked for Dogtra Company. And so there's a handful of things that immediately do that we want to check out when you get a dog in this situation. And I said, "Okay, Karen, go over the dog and tell me, does the dog have any cuts or bruises, blood coming out of the mouth?" Let's rule out the first thing, Chad, which is hit by cars, what I call it. And she went all over the dog, and she said, "Pete, the dog's breathing was kind of shallow." She didn't think it was going to make it the night. It was 8 o'clock at night. And I said, "Okay, so we can rule out hit by a car. What about poison?" Karen lives out in the country, farmland all around her. She said, "No, we don't have any poison out." Secondary poison, that's a huge problem with dogs. Secondary poisoning is people out there poisoning rats, gophers, and the dog finds an animal killed by poison or dead by poison, and the dog eats it. And so that's secondary poisoning. We ruled that out. And then at that point, she had gotten a hold of the emergency vet clinic. And all the while, Chad, I'm thinking, this dog might have Lyme's disease. I've seen my own dogs crash from Lyme's disease. And so I went through the whole list of things as she was texting me and talking on her way to the emergency clinic. And as it turned out, after they got the dog there, they went over the dog. They couldn't find out anything. They did a Lyme's test. Dog had been vaccinated for Lyme's. The Lyme's vaccine is not 100%, like a lot of vaccines. And so at the end of the day, I sent her a message and I said, "Don't let them let you leave there without treating this dog for Lyme's disease, because I have a sneaking suspicion that's what it is." And Lyme's is actually fairly easy to treat. You treat it with a product called doxycycline and an anti-inflammatory and a pain medication called Rimadyl. And so even though the dog tested negative for this, they still put the dog on it. Karen got home, gave the dog the first tablet of Rimadyl, and she told me within 15 to 20 minutes, this dog was starting to respond. Here's a dog, Chad, the reason I tell that story is there's a lot of people would have looked at this dog and thought, "Holy mackerel, he's on death's door. Something happened to this dog and happened bad." Karen said, "I don't think he's going to make the night." I don't know if, I told her this the day after, I don't know if a dog would die from Lyme's disease, but I've seen my own dogs break of this. And Chad, I've seen my own dogs go from a dog that was 3 to 4 years old. And within the next time I let him out and take him for a walk, he looks like he was drugged behind a truck or aged to be 15 years old. That's how dramatic and devastating this disease can be. We've got deer all over Minnesota, and with deer comes deer ticks, and they spread the Lyme's disease all over. And that was a story that I wanted to tell because people forget about how important this is to go over your dog at the end of a hunt and make sure that the dog doesn't have deer ticks on him. And then to know the symptoms that I just described. Like I said, I was thinking, gosh, I hope this dog has Lyme's disease because it's very easy to treat. Most dogs respond very quickly to it. And that's what it was. I talked to Karen the next morning, sent her a text. I said, "How are things?" She said, "Dog's back to normal." So
what
that's
happens?
A pretty interesting story. Go ahead.
It's very interesting, and it's very easy to take for granted that you're not going to, face this issue once the weather starts changing in September, October. What happens if your cell phone's not on and she can't get a hold of anybody? What's going to happen to that dog as he lays there? And you already mentioned, Pete, that the vaccination is not 100%. This dog had been vaccinated for Lyme's disease and tick bites like this, but he still has been he's been infected now. What happens in the next 24 hours if she doesn't get the Rimadyl into the dog per your request?
Well, that's a great question. And I've always been able to self-diagnose or get my own dogs to the vet, or in this situation with Karen, had the opportunity to give her advice. And Karen's no dummy. She was able to get the emergency vet clinic on the phone and get the dog there, even though it was about 20 miles away, because I live out pretty rural. I don't think dogs can die from Lyme's disease, overnight like that. But Lyme's disease in itself is not something you want to have the symptoms of never being treated, just like in a human being. Because it can lead to a lot of different things. It can. And this dog was literally, she said, the breathing was very shallow, laying on its side. To the average person, Chad, she thought at first this dog had been hit by a car or a four-wheeler or something like that. So, first and foremost, if you can't get a hold of somebody that has some background with dogs and veterinary medicine, is the first thing to do is you got to get your dog to the vet. That's always the first thing. But then as she was going, I kept thinking, don't leave there without treating this dog for Lyme's disease. And then at one point she said, "You really think it is?" And I said, I hope it is. And I hope I'm right. And as it turns out, it was. So that's really important because we do have a lot of deer ticks up and all across the Midwest. And you can't find them all. Deer ticks are very tiny. And yeah, you can put different treatments on your dog to kill the ticks as they bite in, that product that goes through the bloodstream. But quite honestly, that stuff isn't always 100% effective. So that's a real problem up here in the fall. And people forget about it, especially the guys that go and gals that go in the grouse woods and the pheasant. That's where they're going to find these. We're less inclined, waterfowl hunters are less inclined to find this out in the weeds. But if you cut through some areas that have a wooded area that have deer, I'm here to tell you, your dog is probably going to get infected or infested with deer ticks.
So if you are a grouse hunter, pheasant hunter in that area of the Midwest where they are proficient, the deer ticks, but you just said that you could probably may get it in a duck hunting situation. It's depending on how you access your pond or where you're taking your dog.
Yep.
What's the best way to inspect a dog for a tick? Are you going to see signs that he or she keeps, throwing his leg up and itching? Or what's the best way to do it? Is it a magnifying glass? Is it what do you got to do?
I just use my fingers, Chad. And typically any tick is going to go to the high spot on the dog. So you don't normally find ticks around the dog's tail, the abdomen, the chest. Normally you're going to find them anywhere from the shoulders to the neck, up around the ears and the neck area. So that's the place to focus on. And these darn deer ticks, before they become engorged with blood, are tiny. They're like like a head on a pin. But once they become engorged, they get to be maybe the size of a pea. So then they're fairly easy to find. But quite honestly, at that point, Chad, the dog has probably been exposed to the Lyme's disease. And not every dog breaks with these symptoms. My master hunter, Trey, has been tested for Lyme's over and over and over. He's never shown any signs of it. I've got other dogs. I got a 2.5-year-old dog that has never tested positive, is so to speak, but his titer's been low, and he's broke with it. And again, he was about 1.5 years old, Chad, when he broke with it. And again, he looked like he went from 1.5 years old to be about 10 years old. He could barely even lift his leg to get over the bar in the kennel. It really comes on pretty darn quick. So I think it's really important that people know what it looks like to start with, because if you don't, you could be looking at this dog saying, "Hey, what happened to him? Did he get poisoned? Did it get hit by a car?"
Yeah, that's a huge difference in a normal dog's activity and personality to see it go that fast, which that's why I asked the question, like, what happens in the next 24 hours? It seems like it would just get worse. Now, can a dog naturally recover from Lyme's disease, tick disease, if you let it go on? Will that dog that's laying there looking like it got hit by a car recover on its own?
That's a great question, and I wish I had the answer to it. It might have never, all the ones I've ever seen at the kennel that had it, or my own personal dogs, or in this case, the dog that I was telling you the story about that Karen has, we've all of them I've been able to diagnose, get them to a vet, or self-diagnose and get them on the products we just talked about, doxycycline, which works really well, and Rimadyl. Rimadyl is it's a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory. It's a chewable tablet, works phenomenal on these dogs. My own dogs, when I've tossed them one of these, when they broke with the Lyme symptoms, within a handful of hours, they're just about back to normal. But I don't know, Chad. I don't know the answer to your question. But again, it goes back to what I said. When in doubt, get the dog to the vet. But I know this, that Lyme's disease is not something that a human being or a dog, you want it to let go long-term untreated, because I think it's very hard on your joints. And, some of these dogs can become paralyzed from it, paralysis, they call it. So it's something that's really important that you don't let it go untreated.
Yeah, it's almost like duck hunters, and that's I'm referring to duck hunters because I'm around a lot more of that type of hunter than a Midwestern Iowa, North Dakota pheasant hunter, South Dakota pheasant hunter, which. There's a ton of pheasant hunters. You go to Mitchell, South Dakota on opening day and look at the line out the Cabela's door to get some blaze orange.
Yeah.
I mean, in a pair of boots, it's really amazing. But when our mentality is like, when you watch these dogs work, they almost become invincible. And I think that a lot of duck hunters have that mentality, like, male or female, to watch them go, whether it's flooded timber or river hunt and fight in the current or a dry field hunt, and they do 300 retrieves on a spring snow goose depredation hunt. We look at our dogs as being invincible. And in fact, we have to be the ones that are checking on everything from their diet to this tick to their body temperature, which is kind of being in the area that I had a question for you regarding body temperature, kind of transitioning from the tick disease. If you have any more thoughts on that, just let me know, Pete. But I really, as we're talking about maintenance per se and health of a dog, there's been a huge influx in vests in the last decade, 15 years of protective gear. Even the upland variety has vests to protect them against different shears or wood poking into them and stuff like that. But when it comes to waterfowl hunting, do you always wear a vest? Now, the flotation part of it, there's the body heat part of it. There's the ability for the handler to be able to have something to grab onto with these per se, quote unquote, boater vests with the handles up top. There's a lot of different designs. A lot of them are very innovative. Are they pulling the wool over the consumer's eyes to get him to spend money on a product that a dog doesn't need because he or she is invincible? Or do we need to pay attention to the core body temperature of a dog during a hunt? And if so, how cold does that water have to be before Pete Fischer puts a vest on his dog?
Again, another great question. And in regards to the two different types of vests, the one that's a protective vest that we're going to put on that dog, Chad, and he's out pheasant hunting, we have to be careful with that because it can trap the dog's body heat around them. Okay. And we might be pheasant hunting in some pretty warm temperatures. Most of those are going to cover the dog's vest in the backside and the torso are going to be open. It's going to be a chest protector. And I do think they're made out of a very heavy cordura. They do work well. In regards to the insulated vest for the waterfowl hunting, the waterfowl hunter, I would say this. Early season, I don't use them because our water's still pretty warm up here in Minnesota. We've had some opening days waterfowl hunting in the morning. It's 80 degrees and you spend more time swatting mosquitoes than you do anything. There you've got to be careful, Chad, because we don't want to put an insulated vest on a dog and overheat him. Now, on the flip side, what is that vest really made for? It does help in flotation, but really late season hunting where my dogs have had to break skim ice and go out, that vest is trapping the dog's body heat around their body, keeping the water away from their skin and their torso, because dogs can go down from hypothermia just like a person can. And so normally what I've done when I've cold weather hunted and it's so cold that we want to put that vest on the dog, I get the dog in and out of the water as fast as I can. I might have some kind of a blanket with to cover the dog up, but I don't take that vest off, because if you ever took a vest off a dog in those cold water situations, it has stopped the water from getting around his torso. And so it's an insulation. It has an insulation factor, but also it keeps the water off the dog's torso. But I've seen them already where you get into these really cold situations where you'll start to see this dog start shivering. And again, dogs have a very high tolerance for pain. And so at the point where you might notice they're in trouble, Chad, they're already in trouble. Back to the Lymes, we have no idea when Karen's dog broke with the Lymes because nobody was home all day long. I would assume it probably broke with this Lyme sometime during the day. Nobody's around to notice it, which a lot of people have to work and the dog's unattended. So I don't know how long that dog was laying there. When I've got that dog out waterfowl hunting and I've got a vest on him and he looks like he's cold and starting to shiver, then it's up to me to know that we're in a situation where that dog needs to get out of the water, get covered up and get warm. And then I always tell this to people, we're talking about hunting some ducks. And is it worth risking my dog's life with hypothermia over a handful of ducks. I can always get more ducks, but I may not be able to ever replace that particular dog. And I'd feel guilty as all hell if that something happened to him. So in regards to those questions, I say the vests are very beneficial, but we have to use some common sense when we put them on the dog. We want to put an insulated vest on a dog that's out hunting in 80-degree temperatures. We'll overheat them then.
So is there a tip that you could give the end user, the potential consumer that's looking to get his male or female into a vest? Do we want it to be snug tight to where it's almost like a bodysuit? Do we want to have a little bit of play in it around the neck and around where the water's going to slide through it and evacuate out of the different parts of the vest? What are we looking for as far as fit goes?
Most of them nowadays seem to fit fairly tight. And so the reason being is that it keeps the water from leaking underneath the vest. And so it keeps the dog dry, but you also have the insulation factor. So I think a little bit tighter, the fit, in my opinion, is better. You might have some people that disagree with me on that. The other thing is if they're loose, Chad, and I've got an area that we hunt out back that was a flooded willows area. And I don't want that vest to be so loose that when that dog's in there looking for a down bird and he's 150 yards out from me, and once that vest gets snagged in a opening on the around the chest or the shoulder area, and now he's caught out there, and Pete's got to go out there and get this dog and bring him back in. So I think a tighter fitting vest has a lot more benefit than one that's going to be loose on the dog and not really give them a lot of protection and insulation, but also you run the risk of it getting caught on things. Do you have other things in your blind or your boat blind or your pit blind, Mr. Pete, to remedy this type of situation? Are you having, during your cold weather time up in Minnesota, which can get very cold? I've had days in Minnesota and North Dakota to where you ask yourself, what the heck are we doing out here? Because we are just chasing a mallard, but those are the days that can be very memorable. Do you have a buddy heater? Do you have like a chamois that's going to get a lot of that water off the dog? Are you trying to maintain that dog's body temperature, in between each go and each retrieve as much as you can on these cold days? Yeah, I mean, that's I want that dog in and out of the water as fast as I can. When I've had to hunt and one memorable hunt I had was with my buddy Greg Ruby, and we had my master hunter Rex, and it was iced up, but we got out there, Chad, and the ducks were we caught them just perfect. You've been there. And these birds were swirling in, and we had to break some areas open and put our decoys down. But, when you're shooting ducks, you can't always drop every bird right into that opening in the decoys. So they were falling out on the ice. And here's where a handling gun dog comes in. I'd send him out. He'd break ice to get that bird, but then he might be off in a distance and he can't tell where his path was out. I'd cast him back over to that ice broken path and bring him back in so he didn't have to break ice all the way back in. That was one of the colder hunts for a dog I've ever been on. He had a vest on. Eventually we cut it short. We had our fun, but I said, you know what? Rex is too valuable. Any dog's too valuable to lose to hypothermia. Once we got him back into shore, I had one of those old green army blankets. They're woolen. And I toweled him off good, and I wrapped him up in that and let him dry off. And the other thing is let him run around and let his circulation come back. A lot of times these dogs are just sitting there by your side and they're wet and they're cold. And so, to chamois him off, throw some kind of blanket over him, the old style woolen blanket. There's something to be said for that. I think everybody's had those over the years, that army green woolen blanket, and they work phenomenal for retaining that heat over the dog, because the dog's body temperature, Chad, runs about 101 degrees. That's normal. It's not 98.6 like a human being. So those are the things that I do but I've never had any kind of a heater, but I just use common sense also. If it's that cold, then it's probably too cold for the darn dog. And plus I'm dry and he's wet. So that takes the body temperature, reduces it faster. And so you got to really be careful with that. So it's okay to call it good. No more retrieves for them, no matter how invincible we think these animals are, which they are on a lot of occasions. But it's okay. It's our responsibility to say, that's the last one of the day right there. Yep. And I think that a lot of duck hunters have a hard time accepting that, right? Because they want to see that dog perform amazing stuff throughout every hunt day. But when you start talking about body heat, Mr. Pete, and you start talking about the health aspect of a hunt, you just mentioned before
you'll have really balmy, mosquito-ridden 80-degree days in October. Then all of a sudden, November 1st, Thanksgiving time, you'll have something that might be -8 with a high of 25 in that area. What about kibble? I want to transition a little bit into diet now. Because there's this mentality out there that I abide by of a dog's stomach being full before activity, with his body temperature being 101 and that GI tract and everything working together. Do you really want a bunch of food in that dog's digestive system? On a cold day, is it the same mentality? Do you carry kibble? Do you carry protein snacks? Do you carry a biscuit from McDonald's extra from the morning drive-through on these cold days for the dog? Or do you keep him hungry throughout the hunt and then feed him right after, even on the colder days?
Well, Chad, I can tell you don't know me very well, because if there was a biscuit from McDonald's, it's never making it to the dog or to the blind with Pete Fischer around. Okay. But here's my theory on this, is that I don't want to feed that dog right before it's going to be active. Okay. And here's why. I don't want a bunch of food sloshing around in this dog's belly, the weight of it, and a bunch of water with it as well. Dogs can get something called gastric torsion. Common term for it is bloat. All right. And so I personally don't want a lot of food in that dog before I'm going to work him. I don't care if it's waterfall hunting where he's got to do a bunch of retrieving, or and for sure if he's in the upland where he's got to do a lot of running and searching for birds. And so I don't feed him. If it is, it's going to be hours beforehand, Chad. I see this when I had my licensed shooting preserve. Besides the dog training, I'd see these guys come and they were going to do an hour or two pheasant hunt, and they'd get pulled in and they'd open up their crate and give the dog a dish of food. And I think it was more to make them feel good than it was doing any benefit for the dog. And here's my theory on it: if I've got a well-conditioned dog that's on a good food, and I fed Eukanuba for years, and I went off Eukanuba for a very short period of time, and I'm back on Eukanuba, and I'm a firm believer in the product. Fed it for 30 some years, and I'll get into a discussion with some people and say, well, really, what do you know about dog food? And I said, well, I just know that my dogs, most of my own personal dogs, lived to be 13 plus years old. They had great lives. They hunted. They did well in competitions. And I think it's feeding a good all around food is really important. And so what I tell people is that you're probably you're making yourself feel good about feeding the dog before you're taking them hunting. And I think you can run the risk of bloat happening with the food in the belly and the dog sloshing all around. And the bloat is basically the belly inverts. And normally it's very rare that a dog will not survive. That bloat is not fatal for a dog. And so when you notice a dog that goes into shock from being from gastric torsion, they normally don't last. You can haul them to a vet, but it's a very small percentage of dogs that survive this. So I'm always leery about feeding my dogs a big pile of food or any amount of food before I hunt them or have a lot of activity level, training them as well. But we're talking hunting. The same way when I get done with a hunt, I see this where guys are like, oh gosh, I just got done upland hunting for 2-3 hours. The first thing I got to do is give the dog a whole bunch of water and food. I let the dog settle down. I let his gut settle down. And an hour or two later, then I'm going to feed the dog, and I'm going to feed a good quality food. And one of the things that I tell people about feeding a good quality food is the digestibility. The digestibility means that this food is not in the dog's stomach as long as a lot of the other foods. And the other thing is because it's a highly digestible food, I don't have to feed piles of it. I see these individuals that are feeding a lesser quality food, and they'll feed the dog a coffee can, a big Folgers can of dog food. And the quality of some of these foods that are out there are such that you do got to feed them that amount to get the nutritional value with a product such as Eukanuba. I mean, if you saw what I feed my dogs twice a day, I feed them in the morning and at evening. Some people say, well, gosh, Pete, you're starving them to death. Then I look at them and I say, well, you tell me if that dog looks starved to you. And so mine are lean, but this time of the year, they're going to look even leaner as I start pheasant hunting them. So I'm not a big proponent, Chad, to answer your question, of feeding a dog before you hunt him or right after you hunt him.
So then you just said that you're a 2-time-a-day feeder, which some dog trainers and handlers will only feed 1 time a day. Now, if you just said that you're a 2-time-a-day feeder, but you're hunting almost every day of the pheasant season or duck season, I'm just assuming that you did or have in your career get after them really big time. Does that turn you into a once-a-day feeder now?
It can, or a midday. But again, I've always been very reluctant to feed that dog a lot of food before if it's going to be within an hour or two of me hunting him. I've never done that. I'll let him go without. And then when we're done and he's had an opportunity to rest, then I'm going to feed him. And then I might feed him again late evening and break that down. Everything is, some trainers, some dog owners might do it differently. You get the guys on here from Eukanuba who actually work for the company. And they might say, hey, yeah, once a day is fine. I've always been a 2-a-day feeder, just the way we did it at the business and the way I do it to this day. But it's broken down into small amounts. But when I know that dog is going to be active, I do not feed him that early, right before a hunt. I just don't do it.
So what is it about the dog food market? I don't know if you feel this way, but I think it's one of the biggest sectors of wool being pulled over a consumer's eye. There's so many choices. There's so many nice labels out there, right? There's so many great print ad campaigns out there. Are all of these foods doing what they're intended to do with a dog besides just make them not hungry anymore, right? Like, are we having the wool pulled over our eyes in a lot of instances, Mr. Pete, in the marketing for dog foods, whether it's just a house pet or a hunting dog, a high-powered duck dog or pheasant dog? It just seems to me like there's a lot of them out there saying farmer's choice and this and that. And, it just seems like a bunch of hoopla to me a lot of the times.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. It's very confusing nowadays when you walk into a pet store and you start looking at the vast majority of this food that's out there. It's really tailored to the pet owner, and there's just so many different varieties. And so I've been lucky that I got involved with Eukanuba early on. I was on what they called Team Eukanuba for a lot of years, so I got to know individuals that knew something about dog food and weren't just there to sell dog food. In regards to the masses, Chad, I see so many different dog foods that are out there that if you really knew just a little bit about the formula and the ingredients of it, most of the dog food that you find on the grocery store shelf is really not made for a working dog. Like the type of food that I need, the kind of fuel that I need to put in a dog like Trey, who's working and running for ribbons and chasing birds all fall. And not to say that the pet owner's dog doesn't deserve a good quality food, but I'm just saying my dog, your dog, has a lot greater needs because he's a performance dog. He needs much better fuel in his system than the dog that's laying around and really isn't a working dog. And people might think, well, gosh, it's kind of a snobby attitude, but the bottom line is most dogs that are just pets laying around in the house all day long do not have the demands on them physically that a working dog is going to have. And so I think it's really critical that you do search out and get a good quality food and put it in your dog. And because I think it's going to reap the benefits many times over in the field. But one other thing that, when you do it for a profession, like I did for 30 years, Brad Arrington and the guys over at Mossy Pond and any other trainer, cleanup becomes a very big issue because whatever goes in has got to come out. And so these foods that are not highly digestible, you got to feed a lot to get the desired results. And guess what, Chad? The stool volume increases, which means more work for the crew that does the cleanup. So I've always fed a good quality dog food. And the other thing that I used to tell my help and the people that work for me at the kennel was they'd say, well, why do you feed Eukanuba? And it's an expensive food. And I said to them, look, I'm providing a premium service. I'm charging a premium price. I don't want, when they say to me, Pete, what dog food do you feed? I don't want to have to tell them the dog food brand that I'm feeding and then have to explain for the next 10 minutes what it is and why I feed it. When I say I feed Eukanuba, most people look at it and say, geez, that's a performance food. I understand it's a premium food. So that's the other reason that I've fed that type of product over the years is just name brand recognition, as it's just good fuel for your dog.
And when you start looking at the amount of money it takes to just be in the duck hunting game or even the pheasant hunting game with the guns and the trucks and the ATVs, and there's really no excuse, right? To if you break down the number of feeds that you're going to get out of a bag, a 40 or 50 pound bag of Eukanuba, you're looking at less than $1 a day, really. I mean, if you break it down on a monthly feed cycle, you might be in it maybe $1.50 a day, if that. And that's not that much money to put what's right into a dog system. Agreed?
I agree 100%. You know, that when we'd start talking to people about having a dog trained or purchasing a puppy, I'd say to them, you know, look at all the other expenses that you're going to have in the very near future with this dog. Veterinary fees. Dog food is really going to come in at a very, very, very small portion of your expenses of your dog. The initial outlay of your dog, of your puppy, what's more important than that, than buying a good quality puppy? So everything is fairly expensive. And dog food is one of the things I don't think you go on the cheap with. I'm sorry. There's a lot of things where I might scrimp. But dog food is not one of them. And all the reasons that I just mentioned over the last 10 minutes, performance, how the dogs feel and handle, how they look, and then name brand recognition. I think that's all very important to me.
So in self-admittingly 30 years plus of feeding Eukanuba, do you do it because they pay you, Mr. Pete, to feed it? Do they pay you to feed it? Are you a paid spokesperson? And I know you're going to say you wish they paid you or gave you, but
I'm glad you brought that up. You know, I got to talk to my old buddy Brett Volmert over at Eukanuba now. I'm glad you brought that up. No. You know, when I was on Team Eukanuba, we'd get discounts on the product. But you know, these companies nowadays can't afford to give dog food away. Dogtra can't afford to give a lot of remote training collars away. I fed it, and because I believed in the product, that's the best thing I can tell you. But no, I've never been paid one dime by Eukanuba. I do work for the Dogtra company now, and they do pay me for my work. But that wasn't early on when I was using their product. So I'm a pretty loyal guy. You know, when Iams Eukanuba sold here a number of years ago, I believe Procter & Gamble owned them, and they were getting ready to sell it to Mars. And they were changing all their programs. I think there were just a lot of things going on when a company sells, and they lost a lot of their field people, a lot of their sporting dog people and the users of the product. Once Mars purchased the product or the business and were developing a product and got new people involved, I went back to it. For a very short period of time, probably 2 years, I didn't feed it. Otherwise, my dogs have been fed Eukanuba for, oh my gosh, Chad, 30 some years in the training business, and now multiple years, since I've sold the business and worked for Dogtra. So I'm a firm believer in the product, and I've just had really good luck with it. That's the best I can say about it.
Now explain that though, Mr. Pete. If you had to write a synopsis of your last comment, what does that mean? What are we looking for? How can we tell? Kind of like if your dog has Lyme's disease, you can do these kind of tests on it and get this medicine. But what are we looking for when you start talking about you're getting great results out of this food?
Great results, great stamina. Coats look good on them. Here's the other thing we haven't touched on is the tartar buildup. Some of these dog foods that are out there, the tartar buildup on your dog's teeth is just unbelievable. Over the years of feeding the Eukanuba product, I see less tartar buildup. I see better looking coats. I see better condition of the dogs. I see better stamina. Just it's the total package is what I tell people. And there's a lot of other good quality dog foods out there. Don't get me wrong, but I'm only going to feed one dog food. One of the biggest mistakes that you can make in feeding your dog is that switching them around to different dog foods based on what you buy in the grocery store or the pet store. If you've got a working dog, pick a good quality food. Obviously, I believe in Eukanuba. Go with that and stay with it, Chad. Dogs are, in my opinion, and I think a lot of the dog food experts would tell you this. It's not good to be switching foods. Feed this brand this month because it was on sale, and this one, and this one, and this one. I've stuck with a good quality food, and I stay with it all the time. I don't ever vary it, and that I think is really important for your dog's his gut system also. And we'd see this when I had the kennel. We fed Eukanuba, but that didn't mean everybody that brought their dogs to me for training fed Eukanuba. So what we would do is we would transition them over to Eukanuba, and I made them bring 20 pounds worth of their own food, and we would mix the formulas together, our food and theirs, and blend it. Because dogs get diarrhea when you just do cold turkey, switch to a different food. And so I don't want that mess. It's not good for the dog to have a dog there with diarrhea or profuse diarrhea. So what we would do is we would blend that food and then eventually wean them off their food during the stay there, and they would just go complete Eukanuba. And then if they didn't want to go on Eukanuba when they got the dog back home, I'd send them back home with Eukanuba so they could blend back to their other dog food. So I think consistency is really important for your dog. Along those same lines, Chad, in feeding this product for many, many years, the consistency of the product. When I open the bag of dog food, I know exactly what I'm getting. And I've fed some stuff over the years that was just, I'd open the bag and I'd look at it and it wasn't Eukanuba. And I'd say, this does not look like the last bag of dog food that I had. So I think consistency of the formula is also very important. And again, this is fuel that we're putting in our dog. I don't want to go on the cheap and put a discount food or fuel in my dog when I expect him to perform at a high end or a high level.
Have you ever encountered a dog that is hard-headed with hydration? Can a high-powered dog be hard-headed? Meaning, I've had days where you would think there's no way you're not going to run straight to the water bowl. He or she might want a few more bumpers. They might want to play a little bit more, but they're not drinking the way that I think they should be to get their hydration levels back to where they're supposed to be, if there even is a level they're supposed to be at on a dog, because a lot of people just put a big water bowl in the kennel and they think that their dog is drinking at will when they want to, right? Is it something that you should control? And on top of that, go into wet feeding. I've been wet feeding I've wet fed a couple dogs, meaning I put water in their dry Eukanuba food. Mm-hmm. One, I want to make sure that people know it has nothing to do with their teeth or not being able to chew the hard food. And I'm trying to soften it up at all. I'm just simply trying to get a little bit more hydration in there. Is that fair to do? And have you ever had to do so? I'm more often than not, Chad, I've run into dogs that when I'm out in the field, I'm working them, or let's say we're hunting them, especially in the uplands where that dog is really working hard under probably warm conditions. That dog's probably going to overwater himself. And I won't let him do that either. I always called it letting him tank up. So the dog gets down to a pond or a lake or somewhere where they've got excessive amount of water, and they just start drinking and drinking and drinking and drinking and drinking. And pretty soon he looks like a tank. This dog has got too much water in him. And a couple things could happen. Remember what I talked about earlier with the weight in the stomach from water and bloat, gastric torsion? The other thing is when they overdrink like that, Chad, and then they start working again, many times, you know what happens? It all comes back out. And so I've always been one to limit the amount of water that they get because I don't want them to tank up. Over the years, I've really run into very few dogs that would get to a point where they didn't want to drink. If and when I did see that, Chad, it would happen at the end of a hunt, mostly an upland hunt, where you have just worked that dog all day long and he's just gassed. He doesn't want to eat. He doesn't want to drink. That might be more common in that situation. And then we want to try and get this dog to eat and drink because now it's the downtime. We might be hunting him the next day. And that happened a lot when I had the shooting preserve. We'd have hunts there day after day after day. So that's the situation where those dogs are expending a lot of energy each and every day. And I want to make sure that they're getting enough food in them and enough water. But when I would see these dogs that wouldn't drink, it was normally because they were just so gassed at the end of the day and they didn't care about eating or drinking. All they really wanted to do was sleep. In those situations, we do want to try and get water and food in them somehow. So where does that leave us on the exercise part of a dog, Mr. Pete, when it's duck season? Let's say you're hunting 3 days a week. That dog's might not be as active on the other 4 days of the week. What is the mindset that you have, Mr. Pete, on those off days during duck season when you know you're going to be, it's not going to be a regular training day. You're going to have the elements, you're going to have the cold, you're going to have the icy water, you're going to have cold water temps, you're going to have all of this going on. Plus, you know, a duck hunt, just like a human, it's different being on a duck hunt than it is at the sporting clays range. It's different for a dog to be on a duck hunt than it is for him to be out in the training arena. Is that something that you take into consideration of maybe some shorter workouts, maybe like looking at it like an athlete, even on my off days, I'm going to go get a bullpen in if I'm a baseball player, stuff like that?
Yep, exactly. I'm going to give them some exercise, but again, I would tell the story about when I had the shooting preserve and these dogs were working for a couple hours in the morning, a couple hours in the afternoon. And I'm talking searching for birds in front of the gun. Upland hunting, pheasant hunting is primarily what they were doing. And they're putting out a lot of energy. And so the days that I didn't have them working, that was kind of an off day where they were out and they got exercise, but I wasn't working with them at all because I needed them the very next day to work again. And so those dogs are become very much like athletes. If you look at something similar to that, Chad, is look at the dogs at the guys, and we'll use our friends over at Mossy Pond again. Those dogs are being trained every day. They're running, they're training hard every day. Yeah, there's some days that roll around where they've got off days, but those dogs are in training or running events damn near almost every day. And so those dogs, you got to get some downtime for them also. And those dogs also, this is why it's so critical to get a good fuel in the dog, because it's almost a day to day. They're like a high powered athlete. And so when they do get an opportunity for a day off, a day of rest, those were the days that I just leave them, say, hey, no work at all.
None, huh? Just none.
No, just exercise, but no, I wouldn't work them at all because I knew I needed them the very next day.
Is a dog's hunt IQ and training IQ, Mr. Pete, meaning, let's just take Trey, master hunter. Axel that's sitting by me right now is a master hunter and a hunter retriever champion, all of this. Is it like riding a bike? What does the upkeep take? Are we taking a chance of that dog forgetting what he or she is supposed to be legitimately the best at once they become a master hunter or able to go out and do all of these drills? There's a lot of drills, a lot of memorization, a lot of stuff that just blows your mind that we could have a dog trainer like yourself or Brad or Lee teach these animals to do this stuff. Is it like riding a bike for these dogs, or is constant upkeep a necessity when it comes to the high-powered duck dog or pheasant dog?
Well, again, depends on the dogs, what I always call the trainability level. But what I found over the years that these dogs that perform at this level, such as Trey or your dog or my previous master hunter Rex, is I could give them some time off, and quite honestly, they hardly missed a beat. Now, if I gave them a month or two off and didn't do anything with them, I wouldn't expect the dog to be sharp, so to speak. But I had times where I was running some hunt tests, and I'm sure Brad could tell you stories just like this. You'd come in and getting ready to go to a hunt test or a competition on a Thursday, and the dog just didn't perform very well. And you always kept thinking, God, I want that dog at the top of his game right before I run him that weekend, right? And of all things, Chad, I would see dogs that didn't have very good days on Thursday, and guess what? They came back on Saturday and Sunday and just were all stars. So, it's the old, every dog has his day. I think these dogs that have high trainability levels have a tendency to retain their trainability very well. And so giving a dog a day off or a few days off, I don't think that makes a huge difference. And if anything, it gives them a little time to regenerate and get them back in good physical condition. And we're back into it, whether we be hunting or training or running competitions again. So I've never been afraid to give my dogs a little bit of time off.
Do you feel that a high-powered duck dog, after he or she develops their social skills, can just treating that dog as a normal pet now, kids, grandkids in the house, on the bed, on the pillow, up on the couch, is there a mindset that you have of, wait a minute, we can't treat this like just a normal house dog, even though, he might not forget everything he or she knows. But do we just go back into that mindset of, hey, he or she's part of the family, Mr. Pete, and put them up on the bed, put them up on the couch, as long as they're well-mannered and their disposition and their manners are there? Is it okay to have them in the house and be part of the family when they are this high-powered athlete?
I love that question. And here's what I would say to that. I go back many years in training dogs where many of these dogs, unfortunately, were just a tool to retrieve birds, chase birds up for the people. And they lived in a 4x8 kennel on a concrete slab in the back corner of the property. And they got let out, food and water, cleaned the kennel, put them back in. And they were just more of a tool than they were part of the family. That isn't the case anymore with many of these dogs, Chad. Many of these dogs are dogs that are in the house, in the kennel, combination, have house rights. I think the bonding process is much greater then. The dog becomes part of the family. I think that's really important. To your point about bringing the dog in the house, my dogs come in the house on a regular basis, especially in the wintertime. There's just so few things we can do up here in Minnesota, and it gets dark so fast. So my dogs come in. I've got dog beds, risers that they go on in my entertainment room, and I'm having a cold beverage at night and watching the news or something, and the dogs are there by the fireplace. I've never been one to let them sleep on the bed. That's just me. I think a bed is for a human being. And our dogs are not furniture layers, but they have their spots. They've got mats or dog beds in the house. I think it's just a great way to help with the bonding and make that dog more of a part of your family. It's just too easy, Chad, to leave them out in the kennel in the backyard and forget about them. And so I think that goes a long ways in our control process and keeping a dog bonded to you. And so he's a team player. And so I would run into this question many times. People would say, well, I get home from work and I turn him out and then he runs away. And I said, where are you? Oh, I went in to change clothes and watch TV or whatever. And I said, well, what's wrong with you being outside? What's wrong with you bringing the dog in the house and making him part of the family? My dogs, I'd like to think, are pretty well trained. But guess what, Chad? If I went and turned my dogs outside, and I live on 120 acres, if I didn't supervise them, eventually they would probably start roaming and go over to the neighbors also. But I don't let them do that. My dogs are out. They're either with me under my supervision, they're in the house with me, or they're being trained or hunted. I just never have been one to turn my dogs loose and just let them run free. And so I think by incorporating that dog's into the household just makes for a better mannered dog. I think it just makes them be part of the family. So I like that, and I think it's really important.
I think it's important to keep in mind too that, like, when you look at celebrities on TMZ, right? Oh, really? They wear sweatpants. They go to get milk at the mini mart, right? Like, you just have, we as humans, we get these thoughts that they're not human, right? We always, with the celebrity outlook in our society, especially with social media now, Mr. Pete, we're just like, there's no way that they can be human. They're all just like us with a different skill set. These dogs, I've caught myself, Pete, looking at them like, did you really just take a leak right there? You're not a normal dog. Like, did you really just, it's hard to keep in mind that these are still dogs, right? They're still going to have puppies. They're still going to act like puppies once in a while. They're still going to act like dogs. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? You almost have that mindset. Like, there's no way that you just did that with all of the training you have. They're still just dogs, right?
Well, and again, some of the things we forget about, Chad, is when a dog takes a leak on the furniture, if he raises his leg, we've domesticated these dogs to perform a skill for us and become our companion. And we sometimes forget about, what these dogs were like, there's a certain amount of their instincts that we can't take out of them, and that dog, that male that lifts his leg, he's not doing to upset Chad. He's marking his spot. That's what he's doing. And even though you're saying, geez, he's been trained a lot, and he's a master hunter, and he's my friend and my buddy and my hunting partner, but he just lifted his leg on my favorite chair. He's doing that to mark his spot. We can't take all of this out of the dog. I just saw this recently. We've got a lake place, and one of my dogs found a dead fish and he was rolling on it. and a dead fish stinks. And I wouldn't go down there and roll on it, but I'm not a dog. And I said this to the people that were standing there. I said, well, there's a reason that he did that. And they said, well, why? Because he just wanted to do it. And I said, no. Instinctively, there's something called predator and prey. And that dog is rolling on that fish because he's attempting to mask his smell from whatever would hunt him down and kill him. That's his, before we took these dogs and domesticated them, there's a certain amount of things that that we can't ever breed out of them. And one of them is his instincts are other things could kill him. And he didn't do it. He didn't roll in this dead fish. Trey didn't roll in the dead fish to upset Pete Fischer. He did it to try and mask his scent. But you say, well, geez, there's nothing out there that's going to kill Trey. Well, Trey's instincts don't know that. Trey digs. Your dog, when he relieves himself, probably scratches the dirt like mad, doesn't he?
Oh yeah,
on a regular basis. Yeah,
every time.
And so he's trying to cover his scent. He's covering up his scent. So whatever predator killed him before we domesticated him, what hunted him and ate him, he's trying to cover that scent. So his feces and his urine, so that something else can't find him and track him down. So those are the things that people have a tendency to forget about. Is that he didn't lift his leg on the furniture to upset you. He didn't do that. He didn't Trey didn't roll in the dead fish to upset Pete. It was just some of his natural instincts that we've never bred out of them. And guess what, Chad? We're never going to breed that out of them. They're dogs.
I've never heard that about the predator part, and I've often wondered, like, that's the way that I could tell my dog is done relieving him or herself is with that, kicking up the back legs and throwing dirt on it. That's freaking awesome. That's very interesting that before they were domesticated, they're covering their scent so nothing could hunt them down.
Trying to cover his feces so another animal that was bigger, stronger, faster than him couldn't find him and kill him. And again, but people say to me, well, really, it would go back that far? Well, think about this. We took dogs that showed signs of pointing birds, let's say a German Shorthair pointer, and those dogs pointed birds, and we took that and refined it. And you can take these dogs like a German Shorthair that is just out of backyard breeding that nobody's ever really bred to run in a field trial or hunt test, and they still point birds. And we have that's in his blood, so to speak, that's been refined, but also in some strains of it, we never refined it at all. It's just there yet. Those dogs point birds. Our retrievers love to go and chase things. Okay. They're retrievers. Guess what? The training comes in and getting them to bring it back to us. If you left the Labrador retriever going, you never trained him. I always tell people he's going to do one of two things when you shoot a bird for him. One of two things. He's going to go over and eat it, or he's going to go take it and bury it and so he can eat it later. Where does the training come in? The training comes in getting him to pick it up and bring it back to Pete Fischer, who just shot it for him. So, but we've got that natural instinct for him to chase out and want to pick that up. The natural instinct is not for him to bring that back. Again, the natural instinct is to go bury it and eat it later or eat it right on the spot. So those are some things that, as you start thinking about some of the things that your dog does or doesn't do, that's kind of important to remember that these are just natural instincts that, back when they were in their dingo stage, so to speak, before we domesticate them, that's why they do some of these things.
So patience is key in being a quality dog owner and handler. Patience is key, but I've also heard that guys like you or somebody that gets to your stature in the dog world can disqualify a dog and say he doesn't have what it takes to go to the next level of the dog world, meaning he might not be qualified for Master Hunter. He might not qualify to be Mike Lardy's next gem in the field trial circuit. He might not ever turn out to be a great duck dog, but he's going to be a good companion. He's going to whine a little bit in the duck blind. He might go out and chase butterflies, but he'll get your duck if you throw some rocks over in the general area that duck's in. Why do you disqualify a dog and say, hey, put him to pasture if he's not going to go to that next level? Or are you more of a patient type, Mr. Pete, that's like, hey, let's see if we can turn this thing around?
Again, a lot of it depends on the dog. But back when I had my facility and my business where we were training dogs and people brought them to us and left them with us, we went through weeks of evaluation. And if I saw a dog for various reasons that I saw that just did not have it, what I thought had the drive, the desire, or had some behavior issues, not severely gun shy might be another one that I was pretty good at breaking dogs that were gun shy, but just some of them you just couldn't. I always had the owner come out and I sat down with him. I showed him what I was seeing, described what I was seeing, and I'd say, ultimately, it's your money. You're spending the money on having this dog trained over at Pete Fischer's. I'm going to tell you what I'd probably do, but at the end of the day, you're writing the check. And you do wash some of them out. It's just the nature of the beast. But I was one of those that probably erred more on the side of keeping them a little bit longer to give them a fair shake, rather than just keeping them for a couple of weeks. Say, heck, there's nothing I can do with this dog. Send them on and tell the guy to go get another one, or a gal get another one. So there are times when, especially when you're taking money for a service, and they bring you an animal that just doesn't have it, and you feel like they're going to end up spending a lot of money, and at the end of the day, Chad, they're still not going to have really what you and I would expect is the minimum out of that dog. Then we get to a point where we say, you know what, you're kind of wasting your money on this dog, and see if you can find him another home, or just accept the fact that he's going to be a nice pet and is not going to be a usable hunting dog. But when you start running for ribbons, that's a whole nother game, as you're well aware of. We can get dogs that are usable, suitable gun dogs, but boy, to have dogs that run in the field trial world and the hunt test world, that's not made for all of them by any stretch of the imagination. So those dogs, you probably see a higher rate of dogs that don't make the cut, but that's not to say they couldn't make good hunting dogs and pets yet.
Mr. Pete, thank you for your time. One last question off the top of your head. You don't get a lot of time to think about, like a Budweiser hot seat, quick flash question. If a dog eats Eukanuba, can he or she become smarter and get a better hunt IQ? Will the food make a dog smarter?
I do, yeah. And I'll tell you why. Because if I've got a dog that's operating physically at its peak performance, that means I can put more time and effort in that dog. It really does. And so if I've got a dog that's not got good fuel in him and is not conditioned well, that's a dog that can't take the amount of rigorous training that's required nowadays to have a good duck dog, pheasant dog, or for sure a competition. So fuel is pretty damn important, my friend.
That's Pete Fischer from the Dogtra Company talking today on Eukanuba's Duck Dogs podcast series. We're so thankful and humbled to have Mr. Pete here. Any closing words, my man?
Oh, well, we're into the fall, and now we should be getting out and getting that dog in the field. This is when it all starts to come together. It's actually been pretty warm up here in Minnesota up until the last week or so, but we're in a cool stretch now. So you're going to find me out chasing some pheasants, and if we ever get some ducks around, you're going to see me sitting in the slough too. So, but this is a time just to get out and enjoy the outdoors with the dogs that we've brought along and trained all summer long. Now's the time to get them out.
Thank you all for subscribing to the Fowl Life Podcast. This has been another edition of Eukanuba's Duck Dog series, brought to you by our friends at Eukanuba. Check them out. They are literally kicking butt when it comes to scientific research and the diets that our sporting dogs, high caliber dogs, need to keep performing for us on a daily basis. But don't let that take the attention away from the just general pets out there. Eukanuba makes a dog food for everybody. We're proud and humbled to be teamed up with them, just like we are at the Dogtra Company. Mr. Pete, thank you very much for being here. Thank you guys for all the ratings and reviews. Please tell a family member or a friend to subscribe to the podcast. Download them. We truly appreciate it. We'll keep bringing a diversity in guests and topics. Hopefully y'all appreciate that. If you have any inquiries and you want to contact us, info@thefowllife.com. Tell us who you want next on the podcast or what topics you want touched on. We have a lot of great episodes coming up. Tom, hit that button. This is 2 a.m. Logic. The song is called My Fowl Life.